Hello, welcome back to another lesson. This lesson is going to be covering conditional operators. So here we will be covering if statements and ternary operators, things like that, and other Boolean condition checks that we'll be using frequently in our scripts. So what is a conditional operator? A conditional operator is something that checks a condition. So for example, let's get a moving average. Let's get an exponential moving average, an EMA. To do using the ta.ema function, technical analysis library or namespace, ta.ema, and this takes two parameters, the source, so we'll just leave it as the default closing price, and a length. Let's go with a 50 EMA. So now we have a 50 EMA being calculated on the closing price, and we can start working with this value. Let's start by creating a color variable, and I'll set this color to color.white by default. And now let's plot our EMA onto the chart. One thing I will do is thicken up our line width. Let's set line width to 3, not 34, 3. Save the script. Now we are drawing a blue moving average onto our chart. Let's overwrite the color to our col or col color variable. Save the code. So now we are drawing a white moving average. One example of using a conditional operator in your scripts would be using an if statement. So let's say we want to change the color of our moving average to green when price is above it and to red when price is below it. We can do that using an if statement. We could say if the current bar's closing price is greater than our EMA value, then we press enter and then tab, and anything we write under this tab, this indented tab line, will be executed only if the current bar's close is greater than the EMA value. So in this example, I want to set the col value. I want to reassign that value to color.green if price is above this EMA value. So if I save the script, now the EMA turns green when price is above it and stays white when price is below it. So we could just set this to red, and then we are drawing a green moving average when price is trading above that moving average and a red moving average when it's below. But I want to show you how to use the else operator or statement. So the else will only be true if this is false. So in other words, we're saying if the closing price is above the moving average, do this, else or otherwise do this. So let's set col to color.red and save our code. Now you can see the moving average is turning red when price is below it because this if statement did not execute, and so this else statement did instead. So that is one way to use a conditional operator, an if statement, to perform actions in your script, to sort of create forks in your script. So we have a fork, which is our if statement. If X is true, this path is taken. If Y is true, then this path is taken. That's what an if statement is. That's how you can think of them. And you can stack these together. So we could have another if statement in here that does a bunch of stuff, and then another if statement in there that does a bunch of stuff. You can stack these on top of each other. You can also stack if else's on each other. So I could say here, else if the close is equal to the EMA, then set the color to color.orange. Otherwise, set it to red. Let's save the code, see what happens. There we go. So that code has executed. Now it will be pretty hard to find a candle that closes at exactly the same price as our moving average here. But if that were to happen, this code would get executed and col would be overwritten to orange. So we would be drawing an orange moving average if the current bar's close is equal to the EMA. Otherwise, if neither of these if statements are executed or found to be true, then this final else statement would be triggered. So that's how we use the if-else statement in our scripts. Let's have a look at one other option we have when dealing with conditional operations or checking true and false operations. Let me backspace all of this, get rid of this as well, and we'll just deal with our col variable here. One way I could shorten all of that code that we just wrote is using a ternary operator. is what it's called. I tend to call it a conditional operator when I'm coding because that makes more sense to me in my head, but the official term of this operation is called a ternary operator. And it looks something like this. We can say set color to, and then we want to check, is X true? Question mark. If it is true, then we want to set the color to color.green. Otherwise, if X is not true, then we want to set color to color.red. So by using a question mark and a colon and providing two values in this line of code, we are telling Python script to pick one of these values to assign to col based on whether X is true or false. So if I say here, is the current bar's closing price greater than our EMA value, then set the EMA color to green, otherwise set it to red. If I save the script, we are still getting exactly the same thing drawing onto the chart that we had back when we had all of those lines of code with the if statements. Now, this is the more efficient way to do something like this in our scripts. If we just want to change something's color based on a condition, this is the better way to do it than using if statements because it just requires less code. But there will be times in our code when this won't work. Maybe we need to do several things if a condition is true. This only allows us to do one thing if a condition is true. So for example, let's say we want to enter a trade if a bunch of conditions are true. And once we enter that trade, we want to save our entry price. We want to save our stop loss price. We want to generate an alert. We want to calculate a position size, all of that stuff. You would need to use an if statement for that because you cannot do that in a ternary operation like we can here. This is only useful for assigning a variable one value based on whether this is true or false. So keep that in mind. As they say, different tools for different jobs. The job of a ternary operator is to shorten your code, where an if statement is not necessary because you only need to assign a variable one value. But the cool thing about this is we can stack these on top of each other. So I can say if the close is greater than the EMA value, then set our EMA color to green. Otherwise, and here I can get rid of this and I could do another ternary operation. I could say, is the current bar's close greater than its open? Question mark. So is this current bar bullish? And then I could set the color to color.purple. Otherwise, if the current bar is not bullish, if its close is not greater than its open, then we could set the color to color.red. So now when I save the script and get rid of my drawings, let me zoom in a bit here. I'll explain what this code is doing. So what this is saying is, if the current bar is trading above the EMA value, set the EMA line color to green. Otherwise, if we are not trading above the EMA, that means we're trading below it. And then we check, is the current bar bullish? If it is bar and it is bullish, like you see here, then set the color value to purple, which we see here. Otherwise, if the bar is red or bearish, set the EMA line to red. And so it looks very complicated. It looks very confusing to the human eye. It will take a lot of practice for you to understand how this works. One way to make this more intuitive is to simply use parentheses. So I could wrap this whole thing in parentheses, and then we could wrap this in parentheses and save the script. And now nothing has changed. We're still doing the same thing. But now we know that this code here is wrapped in parentheses, and this is a new conditional statement. So that's one way to make this a little bit more readable to the human eye. It's not often you'll need to do this, but the option is there when you want to keep your code as efficient as possible in terms of line count. This is perfect for things like changing indicator colors, drawing tool colors on your chart based on certain conditions. Personally, I've never needed to stack more than two ternary operators together in one line of code, at least not that I can recall. Usually it will just be one ternary operation like you see here. So that will do it for this lesson. Don't worry if this was a bit confusing for you. We will be covering a lot of this stuff in future lessons in very intuitive and practical use cases in our scripts when we get to building out indicators that detect certain market conditions and candlestick patterns and so on. So with that said, I'll wrap this up here. If your head is spinning after watching this, just watch it a few more times. Play around with the code in your own Python editor And this will begin to click very soon, I promise you, especially when we get to future lessons like I just said. And so, I will speak with you in those future lessons. See you there.